longer. Este es un fragmento de The Robber's Daughter de Astrid Lindgren, el capítulo 4. Ronya woke up early next morning. Her father was already eating his porridge, but he was making slow progress. He would lift the spoon gloomily to his mouth, but sometimes he forgot to open it. He wasn't getting much porridge down, and it was no better when Snip, who had been standing guard at Hell's Gap all night with Bumper and Shaggy, suddenly rushed into the stone hall shouting,
Ranulph is waiting for you, Matt. He's standing there on the other side of Hell's Gap and carrying on, and he wants to talk to you immediately.
Then Snip jumped back hastily, which was clever of him, because the next second the wooden platter with Matt's porridge on it flew past his ear and hit the wall, splashing the porridge everywhere.
You'll clean up after yourself.
Lena reminded him sternly, but Matt wasn't listening to her.
So, Ranulph wants to talk to me. Death and destruction, so he shall. And then he won't be doing much talking for quite a long time, if ever,
said Matt, clenching his teeth till they squeaked. Now all the robbers were crowding into the room from their bedrooms, eager to know what was going on.
Swallow your porridge as if the place was on fire, because we're about to take a wild bull by the horns and heave him into Hell's Gap.
Ronya jumped into her clothes. It didn't take long, because she had only to put a short, fall-skin tunic over her shift with trousers to match. And she always went barefoot until the snow came, so no time was wasted on boots or slippers when she was in a hurry. If only everything had been as usual, she would soon have been out in the woods. But nothing was as usual anymore, and she had to go up on the roof with them to see what was going to happen. Matt urged his robbers on, and with their mouths still full of porridge, they all marched, with Lena and Ronya, determinedly up the stone steps for the fort to the roof. Only Skinny Pete stayed alone by his porridge platter, fretting bitterly because he could not longer join in when there was some fun in the offing.
Too many steps in this house, and too rickety legs for that matter.
It was a clear, cold morning. The first red glow of sun lit the deep forest around Matt's fort. Ronya could see it over the parapet. She would have liked to be down there, in her own quiet green world, not here by Hell's Gap, where Matt's robbers and Ranulph's robbers now stood arrayed, glaring at each other straight across the chasm which separated them. So that's what he looks like, the snake in the grass, she thought, when she saw Ranulph standing there, so bold and bare-faced in front of his robbers. But he was not as tall and handsome as Matt, so that was a good thing. He looked strong, though. There was no denying. He might be short, but he was broad-shouldered and powerful, with tufts of red hair sticking out in all directions. Beside him stood someone else with red hair, although on him it lay like a smooth copper helmet round his head. It was Birk, apparently enjoying the scene. He gave her a secret wave, just as though they were old friends. So that was what he thought, the thieving dog.
That's a good thing. You came so uncommonly fast,
said Ranulph. Matt gave his enemy a black look.
I would have come before, but there was something I had to finish first. What sort of a thing?
Asked Ranulph civilly.
A poem I was making up early this morning. Lament for a Dead Ranulph Robber, it's called. Hannah might get a bit of comfort from it when she becomes a widow.
Perhaps Ranulph had thought that Matt could be talked round and there will be no more quarreling about the matter of Ranulph's keep.
You should be thinking more about comforting Lena, who has to put up with you and your big mouth all the time.
Hannah and Lena, the two in need of comfort, stood each on her own side of Hell's Gap, arms folded across their breasts, and looked each other straight in the eyes. They looked as if they could get on quite well without any comfort.
Now you listen to me, Matt. There was no staying in Ranulph's Wood any longer. Soldiers are swarming there like flies, and I had to take my wife and child and all my robbers somewhere. Maybe so, but just stealing yourself a place to live, slap bang, without asking, is someone no one with a sense of shame would do. Strange talk for a robber. Haven't you always taken what you liked without asking? Hmm,
said Matt. He had no answer to that, and Ronia couldn't think why. She would have to find out what Matt had taken without asking.
talking of one thing and another, it would be interesting to hear how you got in, because then we can throw you out the same way. That's enough talk of throwing out. How we got in? Well, you see, we've got a little monkey here who can climb the steepest walls with a long, strong rope like a tail behind him.
He patted Birk's red topknot, and Birk smiled quietly.
And then the little monkey tied the rope on good and tight up there so that we could all climb up after him. And after that, all we had to do was to walk straight into the keep and start organizing ourselves as proper robbers then.
Matt ground his teeth for a time while he pondered this. Then he said,
As far as I know, there is no entrance on the north side.
"Mhm."
As far as you know, there's not much you know or remember about this fortress, although you've been living here all your life. You see, in the days when it was more of a gentleman's home than now, the maids had to have a little door where they could go out and feed the pigs. Surely you at least remember where the old pigsty used to be when you were a child, where you and I used to catch rats until your father found us and gave me such a box of the ear I thought my skull was going to burst. Yes, my father did many good things. He kept all the Ranulph snakes in the grass in their place when he came across them. Yes, indeed. And it was that bully who taught me that every member of Matt's clan was my enemy, alive or dead. Before that, I had scarcely realized that we belonged to different clans, you and I don't expect you realized it either. I do now. And now there will either be a lament for a dead Ranulph robber, or else you and your rabble leave Matt's fort by the way you came. There may well be laments of one kind or another, but I've made a home in Ranulph's keep, and there I shall stay. We shall soon see how things turn out,
said Matt, and all his robbers growled indignantly. They wanted to stretch their bows at once, but the Ranulph robbers were armed too, and a battle in Hell's Gap could only end badly for all of them, as both Matt and Ranulph knew. So they parted now, after abusing each other one last time as a matter of form. Matt did not exactly look like a conqueror when he returned to the stone hall, nor did any of his robbers. Skinny Pete surveyed them in silence, then smiled slyly with his toothless smile.
That wild bull, the one you were going to take by the horns and heave into Hell's Gap. I expect that made a crash that rumbled all around Matt's fort.
eat your porridge if you can chew it, and leave wild bulls to me. I'll deal with them when the time comes.
But since at the moment the time did not seem to have come, Ronia made haste to get back to her domains. The days were growing shorter now. The sun will set in a few hours, but until then she wanted to be in her forest and by her pool. There it lay in the sunshine, glowing like warmest gold. But Ronia made haste to get back to her domains. The days were growing shorter now. The sun will set in a few hours, but until then she wanted to be in her forest and by her pool. There it lay in the sunshine, glowing like warmest gold. But Ronia knew that the gold was deceptive and the water icy cold. All the same, she quickly took off her clothes and dived in. She let out a shriek at first, but then she laughed with pleasure and swam and dived until the cold drove her out. With chattering teeth, she slipped her tunic on again, but it did not help. She would have to run to get warm. She set off and ran like a troll between the trees and over boulders until the chill left her body and her cheeks were glowing. After that, she went on running just to feel how easy it was. Yelling with joy, she came shooting out between a couple of close growing firs and ran straight into Birk. Then the rage welled up in her again. She could not longer have any peace now, even in the forest.
Look where you're going, Robert's daughter. Are you really in that much of a hurry?
What kind of hurry I'm in is nothing to do with you, she snapped, and on she rushed. But then she slowed down. It had occurred to her that she could steal back and see what Birk was doing in her woods. He was squatting outside the earth where the fox family lived. That annoyed her even more, because after all, they were her foxes. She had been following them ever since they had cubs that spring. Now the cubs were big, but still playful. They lived and beat and fought each other outside the earth, while Birk sat and watched them. His back was turned to her, and yet in some strange way he knew that she was behind him and called out without turning.
What do you want, Robert's daughter?
I want you to leave my fox cubs alone and get out of my woods. Then he got up and came towards her.
Your fox cubs, your woods. Fox cubs belongs to themselves, don't you know that? And they live in the fox's wood, which is the wolves and the bears and the elks and white horses' wood too, and the owls and the buzzards and the wood pigeons and the hawks and the cuckoo's woods, and the snails and the spiders and the ants' wood.
I know all the living things in these woods, so don't think you have to teach me anything.
Then you know that it's also the wild harpies and the grey dwarfs and the rumfuts and the murk trolls' wood.
Tell me something I don't know, something I don't know better than you. Otherwise, shut up.
In any case, it's my wood, and your wood too, Robert daughters. But if you want it for yourself alone, then you're sillier than I thought when I first saw you.
He glared at her, his bright blue eyes dark with resentment. He didn't think much of her, she could see, and it pleased her. He could think what he liked. She wanted to go home now and not have to see him anymore. I'm happy to share the woods with the foxes and owls and spiders, but not with you, she said and went. Then she saw the mist coming down over the forest. It rose, thick and grey, from the ground and rolling among the trees. In a moment, the sun had vanished and the golden gleam had gone. Now you could see neither stick nor stone, but she wasn't afraid. She could feel her way back to Matsford even through the thickest fog, and she would certainly be home before Lena sang the wolf song. But what about Birk? Perhaps he knew all the paths and tracks in Ranulph's Wood, but here in Matt's Wood, he was not so much at home. Well then, he could stay there with the foxes, she thought, until a new day dawned without mist. Then she heard him calling out of the thickening haze.
Ronia!
There. Now he knew her name too. Now she was no longer just a robber's daughter. Once again he called.
Ronia!
What do you want? She shouted, but he had already caught up with her.
This mist scares me a little.
I see. You are frightened of not getting home to your thieving people? Then you had better share the fox's lair with them, since you are so fond of sharing. Birk laughed.
You're harder than stone, Robert's daughter. But you can find your way to Matsford better than I can. Can I hold on to the edge of your tunic until we're out of the woods?
That you can't, said Ronia, but she untied her leather rope, the one which had saved him once before, and handed him one end. Here, but you'd better keep a rope length away from me. I'm warning you.
As you like, Robert's daughter.
And so their journey began. The fog closed in about them, and they walked in silence, as Ronia had decreed. They mustn't leave the path now. The least wrong step could lead you astray in the fog. The least wrong step could lead you astray in the fog, Ronia knew. But she wasn't afraid. She felt her way forward with hands and feet. Stones, trees, and bushes were her signposts. They moved slowly, but she would still be home before Lena sang the wolf song. There was no need for her to be frightened. But she had never made a stranger journey. It was as if all the living things in the woods had died and fallen silent, and it made her feel very strange. Were these her woods, the woods she knew and loved? Then why were they so silent and menacing? And what was that hiding in the mist? There was something there, something unknown and dangerous, but she didn't know what, and that scared her. I'll be home soon, she thought, to console herself. Soon I shall be lying in my bed, listening to Lena singing the wolf song. But it was no use. The fear rose up in her, and she was more frightened than she had ever been in her life before. She called to Birk, but it was the merest squeak. It sounded so awful that it frightened her still more. I'm going to lose my wits this way, she thought. It will be the end of me. Then, from deep in the thickest mist, there came soft, sweetly plaintive notes. There came a song, and it was the most wonderful song. She had never heard anything like it. Oh, how lovely it was! How it filled her forest with its beauty. And it took away all fear. It comforted her. She stood still and let herself be comforted. How beautiful it was, and how the song charmed and enticed her. Yes, she could feel that those who sang it wanted her to leave the path and follow the enchanting music into the darkness. The song grew louder. It made her heart shake, and all of a sudden she had forgotten the wolf song awaiting her at home. She had forgotten everything. All she wanted was to go to those who were calling her from the mist. Yes, I'm coming, she cried, and took a few steps off the path. But then came a tug on the leather rope, so fierce that she felt headlong.
Where are you going? If you let yourself be tempted away by the unearthly ones, you are lost. You know that.
The unearthly ones. She had heard about them. She knew that they would come up into the woods from their dark places underground only when the fog closed in. She had never met any of their people, but still she wanted to follow them now wherever they went. She wanted to live with their songs, even if it meant spending the rest of her life underground. Yes, I'm coming, she called again and tried to go. But Birk was there still, holding her fast. Let me go, she shouted, striking out wildly, but he held her fast.
Don't ruin your life.
He said, but she couldn't hear him because of the song. It was so strong now, filling the whole forest with its resonance and herself with a longing which it was impossible to resist. Yes, I'm coming, she called for a third time, and she struggled to free herself from Birk.
She hit and scratched and screamed and cried and beat his cheek hard, but he held her fast. He held her fast for a long time, and suddenly the fog lifted as swiftly as it had come. At the same moment, the song died.
Ronya looked about her, as if newly awakened from a dream. She saw the path which led home and the red sun sinking behind the wooded ridges. And Birk, he was standing there, right beside her. A rope's length away, I said, she reminded him. Then she saw his bloody cheek and asked, Did the fox bite you? Birk didn't answer. He rolled up the leather rope and gave it back to her.
Thank you. I can find my own way home to Ranald's Keep now.
Ronya peeped at him under her fringe. It was suddenly difficult to think really badly of him, though she didn't know why. Go to Blazes then, she said kindly, and off she ran.